Let's be real. When was the last time you heard of a courtroom story that didn't end the way everyone expected? Most of us think of judges as rigid figures, sticking to the cold letter of the law. No emotion, no surprises, just verdicts and sentences. But every once in a while, something happens that flips the script. And when it does, oh boy, it leaves the entire room and everyone hearing the story after in complete shock. This is one of those moments. Imagine a homeless man, beaten down by life, with a record that practically screams, repeat offender, stands in front of a judge moments away from being handed a 10-year sentence. The air in the courtroom, heavy, the victim's family expecting justice, the defendant already bracing for a decade behind bars. And then, just as the bailiff steps forward, something nobody saw coming happens. What followed wasn't just a legal decision. It was a life-altering, heart-stopping, reputation-defying twist that turned heads and changed lives. If you've ever doubted that redemption is possible, or that second chances actually exist in the real world, this story is about to change your mind. Stay with me, because what the judge did next, let's just say, it left everyone questioning what justice really means. There he was, a homeless man, shoulders hunched, clothes tattered, eyes holding a lifetime of regret. Life had never cut him a break, born into chaos, raised around poor choices and shuffled through shelters like a forgotten parcel. One bad day turned into one bad year, then a decade of surviving off scraps and public benches. You could almost smell the despair clinging to him like wet clothes after rain. His criminal record, oh, it read like a sad diary. Nothing violent, mostly minor offenses that screamed desperation rather than malice. Shoplifting bread from a gas station, sneaking into abandoned buildings just to escape the cold, and once getting caught pocketing a can of beans. Stuff you'd hear about and shake your head at, but deep down, you'd probably understand why. The streets shaped him, no doubt. When survival's your full-time job, morality sometimes takes a back seat. You learn to duck from cops, lie about your name, and grab what you can before the next hungry night. It wasn't courage or bravery keeping him going. It was pure survival instinct. No warm bed, no steady friend, no mentor to say, hey, there's a way out. But the robbery, that was different. That night, fear took the wheel. What started as a desperate grab for cash at a corner store spiraled fast. There was shouting, pushing, a broken display case and people calling 911. He hadn't meant for it to go that far. And now he sat in a courtroom, staring down a future he never imagined for himself. What would happen next? The air in the room already felt too heavy for anyone to breathe easily. The courtroom felt like a pressure cooker ready to burst. Every sigh, every shuffle of paper, every nervous cough echoed louder than it should. You could practically feel the tension crawling up the walls. The air smelled like cheap floor polish and anxiety. Even the judge's gavel sat untouched for now. Like everyone was waiting for a storm that hadn't quite started, the victim's family sat in the front row, their faces tight with grief and expectation. Their eyes darted toward the homeless man like lasers cutting through glass. You could almost hear their thoughts screaming, "We want justice." Their hands stayed clenched in their laps, white-knuckled and trembling with a cocktail of sadness and anger. And honestly, who could blame them? The defendant, though. He didn't dare lift his head. Shoulders slumped, hands twisted together in his lap, like he was bracing for impact. He wasn't just physically tired. He looked emotionally bankrupt. This wasn't some cocky criminal sitting there with a smirk. This was a man running on fumes, staring at the floor as if hoping it would swallow him whole. From the defense attorney to the random spectators sitting near the back, everyone shared one thing, that weird, uncomfortable lump in the throat. Some stole glances at the clock on the wall, others fiddled with pens or tapped restless fingers on benches. Even the court reporter paused for half a beat longer than usual between notes. Something big was about to happen, and everyone knew it. The judge shuffled through the papers on his bench, eyes narrowing as he reviewed the evidence one last time. Surveillance footage, witness testimonies, the damage done. It was all there in black and white. The law didn't leave much room for loopholes this time. The homeless man's intentions might have been blurred by desperation. But the facts were loud and clear. You could hear a pin drop as the judge lifted his gaze. For a second, nobody breathed. The defense attorney sat frozen, biting her lips so hard it turned white. The victim's family leaned in just slightly, as if trying to catch every single word before it even left the judge's mouth. Even the bailiff stood a little straighter. Ready for the next steps, then came the hammer blow. 10 years in state prison. The words fell like bricks from the ceiling. No dramatic music, no slow-motion scene like in the movies, just cold official language echoing off wooden walls. The judge's tone was steady, controlled, but if you listened close enough, maybe, just maybe, there was a crack of doubt buried deep in there. The courtroom reaction was instant but muted. Gasps, a stifled cry from someone in the back. The defense attorney's shoulders sagged like she'd just lost a personal battle. The homeless man didn't move at first, almost as if the sentence hadn't registered. But everyone else, they felt the weight of that number. 10 years. It sounded like a lifetime for someone already at rock bottom. For a few long seconds, the homeless man just sat there, silent, still, almost like the sentence hadn't sunk in yet. His eyes stayed fixed on the same spot on the floor, as if looking up would somehow make the words go away, but deep down, something was already unraveling. 10 years wasn't just a number, it was a death sentence for hope. Then the tears came, slow at first, then like a floodgate opening. This wasn't the kind of crying that makes you want to comfort someone. No, this was raw, gut-wrenching fear mixed with the bitter taste of wasted years. The kind of tears you cry when you realize you might never get another chance to change your story. In his head, a reel of painful memories played on loop, sleeping under bridges, begging for spare change outside fast food joints, getting chased off park benches by security guards, faces of strangers, nights of cold hunger, flashes of bad decisions. All of it crashed down at once. He wasn't crying because of jail time. He was crying for every moment that had led him here. You could almost feel the emotional energy ripple through the room. The defense attorney subtly dabbed her eyes with a tissue, pretending to fix her glasses. Even a few courtroom staffers looked away, suddenly fascinated with their paperwork. The homeless man sat there, trembling, barely holding himself together. And just when it felt like this story was over, the judge did something nobody expected. Just as the bailiff took a step toward the defendant, the judge raised his hand, an almost imperceptible gesture, but one that froze everyone in their tracks. The air, already thick with tension, seemed to grow even heavier. The judge leaned back in his chair, staring at the homeless man like he was seeing him for the first time. It wasn't hesitation, it was reflection. He reached for the man's file again, flipping through pages he'd already reviewed earlier. But this time, the judge lingered longer on the details most people would have skipped. Juvenile records, years in foster care, untreated mental health issues, failed rehab attempts, and buried in the last few pages, a short faded letter from a shelter worker describing the man's brief spark of progress years ago. The judge's fingers hovered over that line like it meant something now. Inside, the judge battled with himself. Justice demanded consequences. No question about that. But what about redemption? What about giving someone a real shot at rebuilding? The judge thought about other defendants who'd passed through his courtroom. Some sank, others swam. When given a ladder out, was he about to doom this man to permanent failure without trying one last option? Even the people in the courtroom picked up on the shift. The bailiff lowered his hand. The defense attorney stopped packing her briefcase. The victim's family exchanged confused glances. Something in the judge's posture changed, less rigid, more human. Nobody spoke. Nobody dared breathe too loud. Whatever was coming next, nobody could have predicted. The judge stood up, walked off the bench for a moment, and disappeared behind the chamber door. A long minute passed, then another. The courtroom buzzed with low whispers and exchanged glances. Was there a procedural delay? Was something wrong? People craned their necks, murmuring under their breath like school kids gossiping after class. When the judge returned, everything about him felt different. His steps were slow but deliberate, his expression somewhere between stern and hopeful. Without sitting down, he called the homeless man back to the center of the room. The defendant stumbled to his feet, still dazed, wiping his face with the sleeve of his worn-out hoodie. The defense attorney blinked, confused but curious, and then it happened. The words that would echo through that courtroom for years to come. "I'm revoking the 10-year sentence." The room froze. You could almost hear someone drop their pen near the back rows. The bailiff raised an eyebrow. Even the court reporter paused, lifting her fingers off the keys for a split second like she needed a double take. But the judge wasn't done. With a steady voice, he explained that instead of prison, the man would be offered something unheard of in cases like this: a full placement in an intensive rehabilitation program, job training, counseling, mentorship, the whole package. This wasn't just leniency, this was a lifeline being thrown across a river the defendant had nearly drowned in. The judge leaned forward, resting his hands on the bench, voice steady but packed with intention. This wasn't some random feel-good decision. The rehabilitation program was no walk in the park. It meant early mornings, job training workshops, counseling sessions, and community service. Real sweat, real accountability, real work. And if the homeless man messed up, well, prison would still be waiting on standby. He explained why he made the call. The judge had seen too many people lost in the system. Good people, with bad circumstances, stuck in a loop of arrests and empty promises. This time, he wanted to disrupt the cycle. He believed in justice, sure, but he believed in redemption too. Sometimes the scales of justice need a little human touch. The terms were crystal clear: one missed appointment, back to court. One failed drug test. The original 10-year sentence would snap back like a mousetrap. The defendant would need to attend weekly check-ins, meet with job placement coaches, and complete a mentorship track with people who'd walked the same dark roads before but found their way out. No excuses, no second chances beyond this one. The homeless man's face said it all. Confusion first, then disbelief, and finally, something else entirely. Hope. His hands shook as he wiped his tears again, but this time they weren't tears of fear. The courtroom held its breath, waiting to hear what he'd say, and as he opened his mouth you could tell this story wasn't done yet. The second the judge's decision landed, the courtroom erupted, not with shouting but with gasps and a wave of stunned whispers. You'd think the judge had just announced he was giving away $1 million. People exchanged wide-eyed glances, mouths hanging open. A few even leaned toward each other, asking in hushed voices, "Did I hear that right?" Some folks were visibly uncomfortable. The victim's family sat frozen, caught between disbelief and confusion. You could see their internal struggle, wanting justice, but also seeing the very human moment unfolding in front of them. Meanwhile, a couple of older spectators near the back actually nodded quietly, like they'd just witnessed something rare and important. The defense attorney, well, she broke character for just a second. One shaky hand moved to her face, and she discreetly wiped away a tear. Anyone watching closely would have caught the small smile she allowed herself after. It wasn't victory. Far from it. It was something closer to relief, maybe even pride. She knew how slim the odds had been, and just like that, the emotional temperature in the room started shifting. People weren't just seeing a homeless man with a criminal record anymore. They were seeing a human being getting shot, an actual, fighting chance to turn the page. You could feel it. Hope, cautious but real, creeping into every corner of that room. The homeless man stood there, visibly trembling, his voice barely a whisper at first, but then, as if fueled by every ounce of dignity left in him, he straightened up and wiped the last tears from his face. You could almost feel him pushing past years of broken promises and bad choices to find the words that mattered. This was more than courtroom drama. This was personal redemption taking its first breath. "I'm going to change my life," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The sentence hung in the air, raw and unpolished, but packed with something rare, genuine intention. He wasn't just saying it to save face or impress the judge. This was a man making a public promise in front of strangers and people who doubted him, to claw his way out of the hole he'd been living in. His eyes locked on the judge with a seriousness that sent chills through the room. "I won't let you down," he added, voice cracking at the edges but steady at its core. The bailiff, still holding the cuffs that would no longer be used today, stood quietly by, watching the scene unfold like something out of a movie. Even the court reporter paused her typing for a second. The room stayed silent. Not the kind of awkward silence that follows bad news, but the kind that shows respect. Some folks nodded in quiet approval. Others blinked back tears they didn't expect to shed that day. But no one doubted it anymore. A shocking twist had just rewritten the ending of this story. Though the real journey for the homeless man was just beginning, months passed, and when the man walked back into that same courtroom, he barely looked like the person from before. Gone were the baggy, stained clothes and hollow cheeks. This time he wore a clean button-up shirt, slacks that actually fit, and a look in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Hope. His shoulders weren't slumped anymore. They were squared like someone carrying pride instead of shame. Word had already spread that he'd completed the entire rehabilitation program. Every workshop, every counseling session, every single early morning job interview prep, and guess what? He landed steady work at a local construction company. The same man who once begged for spare change now clocked in and earned honest paychecks. One of his mentors even showed up that day, beaming from the back row. When it was his turn to speak, he didn't hesitate. He stood tall, walked up to the bench, and looked the judge dead in the eye. "Thank you," he said, voice strong and steady. "You didn't just give me a break. You gave me my life back." The judge, for a rare moment, let the smallest smile cross his face. The courtroom, usually a place for punishment and procedure, felt more like a graduation ceremony. People clapped, quiet at first, then louder. Then, even the victim's family, though still nursing their pain, nodded with a softness in their eyes that hadn't been there before. The inspiring redemption of a homeless man who once stood on the edge had become more than just one person's story. It was now a reminder for everyone that sometimes the right decision can change a life forever. So here's the big question. What would have happened if the judge hadn't paused, if he hadn't taken that one extra moment to reflect? Would this homeless man have become just another forgotten name on a prison roster? Probably, but because of one courageous, counterintuitive decision, a life was changed forever. And now, I'll turn it back to you. How many times have you written someone off without knowing their full story? How often do we let labels like criminal or failure cloud our judgment of what people are capable of becoming? This isn't just about courtrooms and judges, it's about all of us. How we choose to see others, and whether we believe in second chances. So, what's the personal verdict you're handing out today? Are you going to start seeing people through the lens of possibility, or stay stuck judging them by their worst moments? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear from you, and hey, if you found this story as inspiring as I did, make sure to subscribe to the channel, smash that like button, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story that challenges the way we see the world.